No.
Good. Morena, no mai haere mai. Welcome to the extraordinary meeting of council this morning, which is completing our LTP deliberations. Apologies. We have apologies for lateness for Eric Roy, apologies for John Pemberton, and apologies for
I'll move, Jim.
So moved by Neville, seconded by Jeremy. All in favour say aye. Aye. Declarations of interest, I haven't been made aware of any this morning. Not aware of any public forums, petitions or deputations. Also not aware of any notification of extraordinary items or urgent business. Do we have any questions? I'm not.
I said a question through yesterday, Mr. Chair. Sorry, it's not very pithy, but my question is, did yesterday's meeting with the Catchment Liaison Committee chairs involve the submission of comments and criticisms from those chairs on the LTP? The LTP considerations are not yet complete, and it appears that these chairs were given further opportunity to submit on LTP issues where the general public has not. And I watched the proceedings and noted that on a number of occasions you and others made comments about crossing the line, like having another bite at the cherry. So I thought it was, my question is, what was that all about? How did that come to be?
Look, Rob, as far as I'm concerned, unless there was a material change today, we are not taking any consideration of anything that was outside the strict format of that meeting, which was to get the approval of the use of lease lands, which we were required to do. So on that basis, people say things from time to time. People might say something to you on the street, but it's not going to affect our deliberations. Peter, will you?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment on Rob's question. I just felt the format of the meeting was not good, and that allowed to spillage over into those questions, into that territory. So that's all I'll say. I made my feelings quite clear.
Morris.
Well, yes, it was potentially could be a bit of a problem. But I thought the meeting was managed very well. I thought Paul Hulse did an excellent job of keeping people on track, despite the attempts of some people to get off track. So, as you say, we were required to consult with them regarding the spending of police money, so I'm not too worried about it.
And thanks for that. We can move on. We'll move to item 7. And first up is 7.1, draft council decisions and 2024 is the 34th long-term plan, which is on page 3.
Just because, sorry, I'm still set up with the declarations of interest in regards to obviously around the fees and charges deliberations today. We need to note that some of us do have consents. It's the reason we thought to make sure that if there's any discussion or sorry, I'm going back.
Right. Well, I think
there will be, because we do pay those fees, so I'd just like to make it that I am a fee payer.
Yeah,
anything I say or do or don't.
I quite like the general manager, people and customer to perhaps talk to that matter.
Sorry.
So this is a matter of discussing conflict of interest policy in relation to discussing fees and charges and consent holders at the table. Can we just give some advice to the councillors in this regard, please? Thank you.
So, first thing, I think it's important for you all to remember that if you feel that as an elected member, you are discussing a matter where you have a conflict, you and only you are the person who can make the decision about whether you declare that or not. And I think the advice has been to date, if you think you have a conflict, it's best to disclose that. So if there's anybody right at the current time who'd like to take that moment for reflection, I'd encourage you to do so.
Can I ask a question of clarification?
Yep.
So that conflict should be stated at the time that that matter is discussed, as opposed to now, I guess is the question that the Deputy Chair is asking.
It's on 3 on declarations of interest for this meeting, and we're obviously deliberating.
Because you've got the papers actually, so you know in advance that you have a matter where you might have a conflict. It is worth disclosing that at this time, I would say.
Because this is the declaration
Yes,
of
because this is
interest
the
time.
declaration. And then when you, when the matter comes up, then you need to take the appropriate course of action. And so I guess it depends on the extent to which you feel you are conflicted and the nature of your conflict as well. Is it an interest? Is it a pecuniary interest?
Yeah. I'll declare it like I've got an interest, obviously a consent holder, pay fees. I won't vote on the decision. I might make a comment just in regards to the fees, if that's all right. If that's not acceptable, I'm happy with whatever the council.
And I think as already stated, for transparency, it's great you've done this in the past. One of the questions is your interest greater than the general public? But I think transparency in making that decision itself is excellent.
So Chair, it might be, sorry, suggest that perhaps Chair, you actually just provide the councillors to state, now that we're here and we are discussing fees and charges, whether they do individually have a conflict. So that it's not just it's a councillor by councillor.
I've got a conflict, I've got consent in my name.
And so your course of action at the meeting might be?
I will remove myself from the table.
Okay.
But if I'm happy enough to sit at the back, am I?
So
it's not for me to advise in
Okay.
terms of
I will take no part.
direction.
yeah.
That's fine.
Amy, I might just keep you here for this vote, just so that there's clarification as we go through this. Because we need to actually be really clear about how many people are conflicted at this table, because we'll need some advice on whether or not we have a quorum on this vote. So can I, Chair, just ask that we actually just get an established on a councillor by councillor basis what the situation is?
Paul, do you have any issues?
No, other than being a ratepayer, but nothing on the fees and consent, so I don't have any.
Phil?
No.
No. Peter? No. Loris?
Well, the only thing is, I guess it's a thing about an interest greater than the public. It's not really. But I'm a bit concerned about the way that the burden of the rates has shifted from the rural to the urban, and I'm an urban ratepayer. So my thinking is a bit influenced by that. I'm not sure whether it's a conflict or not. Probably not, but it's
Not totally.
just alert people to that.
So I think our consent today is specifically that we're discussing the fees and charges that are in this. And I understand that. I think as everyone at the table is a ratepayer, I think it's fair to say that you're there with the public. The interest of the public is there and the public good is there. So I don't think that you're in conflict with our advice on that in general. But the specific matters relating to the fees and charges discussion today, you don't have any fees and charges.
No, I don't pay nothing to the council.
Okay, so and so it's just councillor Guyton is the last one.
No.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So we should be fine in that regard. You've got two.
So just to clarify, I know Alice just said, I think, remove himself completely from the discussion. Are we allowed to, what's council happy with? I'm happy not to vote, don't have any decision, but to actually discuss, if there is discussion, to be involved in discussion around it. I don't, no, that's cool. I'm just asking.
I think with the conflicts that have been outlined, they're not specific. I think you can take part, be at the table, but I think the not voting, I think, is appropriate.
So I just need to clarify that, I think, with the General Manager, because there is matters relating to the influence of the decision through discussion on specific fees and charges. So can we just be clear about that? And also, Chair, I think we need a declaration from you also on that.
Right, no, I have no consents.
just actually, just some information. You can just give them.
Yes.
It's not the end of the world. I'm just seeing where we're sitting.
Just being sure.
Oh, yeah, just cover us.
My understanding is that you oughtn't to be commenting on the issue. You're just thinking about listening to Phil just recently on this issue. There were two things that were required: leaving the table and not being involved in the discussions, as I recall,
So I'm pretty certain that
on a specific issue.
your general discussion is fine and general principles is fine, but the specific discussion on specific fees and charges with which you have a conflict, you should not be influencing through commentary as well as voting.
We'll just withdraw from it.
And if you step over the line, I'll tell you.
It's easy.
Okay, so two, so Councillor McPhail and Councillor Gibson on specific fees and charges, and that will arise at the time of the discussion.
Yep, so,
Thank you.
so your removal, from the table in the room, yeah, and the decision, so I'm not saying.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, we've clarified that. 7.1. We have the report from Rachel. Would you like to comment?
So this report brings together the outcomes of the deliberations over the 5th and 10th of June. So essentially draft decisions have been prepared based on your deliberations and the directives you gave us during those 2 days. In particular, there is a draft decision on the budgets. There is a decision around the infrastructure strategy and a decision on the revenue and financing policy and rating review. And then the second part of the item is the draft long-term plan itself and supporting documents that have been prepared, again, based on your deliberations over 2 days. And you might recall we pulled this step through because there were some substantial changes that you deliberated on during those 2 days. So perhaps just to start with the budget draft decision, you'll recall that changes were made. In particular, the proposed rates increase has been reduced through substantial use of reserves, or proposed substantial use of reserves and some adjustments to operating expenditure. You needed to consult, you will recall, with the catchment liaison committees regarding the use of the lease area reserves. So that is part of this discussion in this item, considering the feedback from the committees regarding the proposed use of reserves. And I've just tabled, and perhaps would need to read into the record, a summary of the feedback from the committees. And then essentially there's a series of decisions there for you to make, agreeing or not agreeing on a number of matters, approving the draft decisions. Once you've done that, there's a recommendation that you direct staff to prepare responses to the individual submissions received. And the final recommendation is around approving the draft document for audit. So we can probably work through those one by one and read into the record, the feedback from the catchment liaison committees, if that sounds agreeable.
Okay. So we're starting at 1 on that. We'll read them individually.
So the first recommendation is just to receive the report. The second recommendation is around receiving a submission that was not submitted in error, and I believe councillors were copied into this particular email. We had a submitter who wasn't aware their submission hadn't been received by council. It was a technical error where they hadn't pushed the submit button, and because you had not finalised your deliberations and some of the matters, in particular the Southport matter and item 3, is it, that that related to that. So we recommend that you do receive the submission. The third recommendation is considering feedback from the catchment liaison committees. So whether you want to move 1 and 2, and then we discuss item 3.
I'm happy to move 1 and 2.
1 and 2 has been moved, seconded by Peter. Any discussion? I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no.
So in relation to item 3, I have tabled a document which summarises the feedback from the catchment liaison committees. Feedback has been sought over the last week on whether the catchment liaison committees support or oppose the use of lease area reserves to offset rate increases. The proposal that was circulated to the committees is that that's contained in this council agenda, and it shows use of some of the Ferry Road, Oriti, Mataura, Waihopai and Waitakini lease area reserves. So at the discussion yesterday, some of the committees indicated that they had only been able to get limited feedback from their members, particularly those that did not have leasehold lands in their rating district. Other committees had met and passed resolutions in relation to this matter. There was a general consensus that the committees were not against the use of reserves to fund maintenance work, provided this was set out in the annual work programme presented to them so they could provide feedback on priorities. Some couple of related matters. There was discussion around the need to amend the financial reserves policy to clarify that catchment reserves are to stay within the rating district they are generated in, and you'll see there is a recommendation in relation to that already in the council agenda. There was also discussion around the related separate matter of the lease area land surpluses. In particular, opposition was expressed regarding that. So the discussion via workshops where catchment liaison committee chairs were here, and then in the documentation that went out for the consultation period, proposed to use the 450,000 of lease area land surpluses to cover the costs or financing costs of the climate resilience projects. So that includes the Stead Street pump station, work out in the Mataura, etc. There were submissions in relation to this that came through, you will recall, and the catchment liaison committee chairs, or some of them, reiterated the opposition yesterday. To provide some clarity, we do recommend, in addition to the set of recommendations where you agree or not agree, to use that 450,000 of lease area land surpluses per annum.
Thanks, Rachel. So on the first issue, it was gratifying that the catchment chairs did agree to spend lease land reserves, providing they were informed and they remained in the catchment. So that issue, I think, is reasonably clear, though during the discussion some wording changes to our policy probably need to be made to actually clarify that this was only about leased land, where there was some confusion that any surpluses from those catchments could be taken away and put in a general fund. On the 450, we do have the ability to make that payment, and I'm just thinking for tidiness, I'll probably agree to that, but we need to have a review of that policy. I mean, I've argued in the past that the surpluses should give a dividend to council, a bit like Southport, but really it should be something that the public in general actually benefit from, rather than specific projects. But I'm in the hands of the meeting. I've got Robert.
Thanks, Jimmy. I agree with your last comment entirely. I'm just for a bit of clarity. What exactly is our relationship with the catchment liaison committees with regard how much influence do they have? Do they have some kind of legal standing that we have to follow their direction, or are they advisory? It's difficult to understand the relationship, especially after watching yesterday's meeting. I thought, are these guys laying down the law and we will follow, or could you just clarify our relationship?
It's at the end of the day, our catchment committees are they're part of council, sort of. We could make the decisions, but at the moment we have recommendations that we would consult, which we were doing yesterday before we spend any money. At the end of the day, we could make a decision to override that, but actually from a respect point of view, I'm willing and available to having this conversation. So that was the point of yesterday, was to actually to say to those committees, particularly the ones that where the money was generated originally, that they should approve it, because they've been valuable, an extension of council over many years, and they give pretty good advice on what happens locally. They inform us when there's issues that need to be looked at, so they're part of our eyes and ears on the ground. But at the end of the day, we could make it a decision without doing that, but actually that's not the way I operate. If we've agreed to consult, then we should consult. So that was the point of yesterday.
Just further to that, I'm still a little bit unclear about the technical or legal relationship that we have with them. I understand that we're respectful of them, but I'm just not quite clear.
I'll advise on that.
I was going to suggest that the reason is because our policy states that we should consult.
Oh, yes, I understand that.
Yes.
But it doesn't
My
state
understanding that
how
was
we
the main
should
reason
respond.
for why we had that consultation meeting yesterday, was because it meets
Oh, yeah.
the needs of our policy to do so, and we would be non-compliant with our own policy if we didn't.
Yeah, thank you. I understand the need to consult, but I'm asking about how we are obliged to respond to that consultation.
Mr. Chair, I can provide clarity on this matter.
It's also in the policy.
Yeah, I can provide some clarity if you want. Sorry, the clarity of this is that the catchment liaison committees are a form of committees of council, and we have obligations to consult them. And that's the status. So the obligations are to consult on matters.
Yeah.
My knowledge there.
So just sorry, did that not answer your question?
No.
I'll
but
say it again. They
consult-
are,
No, yeah,
so we have, they
I'll
are
say it again.
council committees. They are council committees, and we have an obligation to consult them.
Yeah.
So council is the decision-making and authorising environment, but you have obligations to consult them on matters,
I understand that fully.
including this matter.
Yes, I understand that.
That's the legal status.
Jeremy.
To my understanding, that they are an advisory group
We are.
to the council, and ultimately it is our decision on what happens.
Yes, it is
That's the
the council's
legal-
decision.
That they can advise, they can bring advice to it, and ultimately the decision lies in place. So that, from a legal point of view, that's what.
You are the decision makers.
Yep.
Your obligation to them, however, is to consult, and that is embedded in the policies.
Yep, I
This-
understand that
the-
completely.
The consultation, just going to the lease land reserves, we have to consult them as part of the policy, so that's why we did what we did yesterday. Ultimately, just in regards to the 450K, obviously there was a wee bit of talk. The main one, I don't think, it always comes around to clarity. Where does it actually go? It's all about clarity where this money goes, and so more so on the REITI, obviously, and this is also the sort of the, I should say, the people that may be against it being used is always that the REITI doesn't cover all the REITI catchment, and instead street sits in the REITI. This is one of the problems about trying to get these payments sorted out. So, so I was just trying to, I don't think Matara have any position of using the 450K. The REITI obviously want a bit more clarification, more discussion about it, but ultimately, from my point of view, I know when we discussed about this has been discussed a number of years ago when we were looking at shovel ready, how are we going to pay? And this was a good opportunity that lease land surpluses, these projects were benefiting a lot of people up those catchments, especially in the Matara, that Wyndham, Matara and Gore have received money from the shovel ready. And this is where ultimately, when it was at the beginning, it was stated that it was $4.5 million was going to be our share. It's obviously blown out, but we said 10 years we can pay this off, and it doesn't affect the rate payment. So budgets did blow out. That's another discussion to have, but that's where these numbers came from, and it was a great way to use some of these surpluses that have been building up that we've never been able to use them, and that's where we ended up developing a policy to actually use them in conjunction with consulting and catchment groups. So this gives a bit of clarity around that. So look, I support it being used. It needs to be used. There are things, we still have this concern with some of the shovel ready around Stead Street, how, and we may be able to review that with how we transition to capital value and beneficiaries of the through the rating system in the future. But one thing I was going to ask question, and Tania might be able to answer, is have we actually used 450,000 this last year? So we haven't actually started that 450. I see there is is that the prepayments, the 460 going through? Is that the same as the 450? I'm just looking at the budgets. So to clarify, we actually haven't used it. It's actually making decisions today. Okay, that's all good.
Thanks, Jeremy. Paul, then Alistair, then.
Thank you, Chair. I have great concern when there's questions from councillors around consultation and why we should and why we shouldn't. It's part of the role, especially with regards to groups, likes of the catchment liaisons. The next step is we don't consult with ratepayers. We do.
It wasn't a question about consultation. You made a decision.
One, fine.
So I don't like the question of why we need to consult with catchment liaisons, where it's pretty clear. I think it's very clear. We have relationships with a lot of groups and a lot of ratepayers, and we need to maintain those relationships. And this sort of thing just does not bode well with me.
Thanks, Paul. I've got Alistair, Neville, and Robert.
I think the main concern in the Matera catchment was the fact that that 450,000 was going to be lost to the general pool. It was pointed out that that wasn't going to be the case. Whatever is earned within the Matera catchment go back into it if it was seen as a surplus at the end. So I think that satisfied the catchment liaison group there.
Neville.
Well, our policy chairman is to consult with the groups, but they don't have the final decision. That belongs to council. And it has been advanced during the submission process that the airport should pay for itself and that not a responsibility that goes across the region. Now, we've discussed that around this table on several occasions, and we are, the opinion, as I gathered, was that the airport is a benefit to the province. And therefore, the cost is to be spread across the province, and I support the spending of 450,000 as recommended.
Robert, Jeremy, then myself.
Thank you. Just to address Paul's concern about questions of whether we should consult or not. As far as I can see, there was no such question. And if he's referring to my question, I was asking, as Councillor Cook has just addressed, what do we do? How are we required to respond to submissions and proposals from various groups? So if that's what you're thinking, you've thought about it incorrectly, and I think Councillor Cook's response is the correct one. Thank you.
Jeremy.
You just, sorry, I was going to clarify, there was a discussion we need to, and just in the future, we need to clarify what the financial reserves policy, whether that overrides this thing. We've got two different reserve policies there. That was one discussion yesterday about where the surpluses end to take leased land surpluses going into budgets, and then if there's a surplus from the budget, do that go back into general? So it needs to be tidied up, clarified. That was a wee bit of the worry, how it moves around in the system in here. And just going back, we specifically put in the consultation point about that in the leased land reserves policy, because the respect of those committees, we wanted to make sure we're all, that's the idea, that why we, that is, they're managing the, advising us on how to manage the river. So that was specifically put there so that we must go and talk to them. We're not seen as we just do whatever we want with the money. So it's hugely important to bring them, everybody to agree, and we'll get some sense of agreement to where this money should be spent. So, but ultimately, it is the council's decision where that money goes. It is the council money. So that's all I'll say.
I'll take you, Peter, then myself.
Okay, thanks very much. Look, the catchment liaison committees serve their own purpose for their own areas. I totally understand that. They don't have to react to submissions, but we have to react, and we did react to those submissions. And that's where we're seeing today is a rainy day. Most people put something on the side if they can, a rainy day. So we've identified that through the submission process, so we're acting accordingly. So really, I agree for the use of that $450,000 for the leased land area surface.
Thanks, Peter. Now, just, yeah, we've seen the importance of the airport in this last few days. It is the third longest runway in New Zealand, and it's been put to good use. So, but I just remind us that we haven't actually made that decision, and we're deferring it till this coming year on the total flattening out of those catchment rates. So there still is the potential for the airport as a beneficiary to pay more going forward. So that decision hasn't actually been made. But the fact that it is strategic and that we all benefit from it shouldn't be missed. But some of those decisions actually haven't been made. We do need to review our policy at the moment to make it clear on the use of reserves, and that can be done at a later date. And I'm still strongly of the opinion that land, a bit like Southport, should provide a dividend to the general public through the general rate rather than the specifics. For this year, I think I'm going to have to bite the bullet and support the 450, but on the back of that, we should review going forward, because I think that's fair.
Yes, just in support of what you've said there, Mr. Chairman, and also just to say that I do agree with the proposal to use the fund.
You need a motion to put that agreement or disagreement, Chairman?
So that is on
3 and 4.
3 and 4, and 4 would be to agree rather than not agree.
I'm happy to move 3 and 4, and I just want to make the comment that at the end of the day, when we're talking about general plan, that, when we look back on the leased land, that 70% of the leased land was paid by the taxpayer. 30%, give or take, different bits, was paid by the ratepayer. So there is that relationship that all the public have paid a portion of it. So these are the discussions that will how we've got to view it, where that money lies. But there is also the discussion about next year, again, who benefits of some of the stuff.
So to move and seconded, any further discussion? So just,
yep. So it's the use of reserves, that's the amount that we've agreed to use, as set out in the documents. You'll note that the report says, further back in the report, on page 10, the implications of using these accumulated surpluses to fund business as usual will reduce the opportunity to use these surpluses in the future to fund requests for additional projects and programs relating to these activities to enhance the level of service provided. So while we know that it's a rainy day at the moment, I think we do need to be cognizant of the fact that this could lead to difficulties in the future.
I think that's a good point, Morris, that if you look at the 10-year projections, we actually rebuild those to a certain extent. And it's always been a concern that this is something that's been built year after year and not using it at all. And so I think the feedback we got that this is a rainy day, let's make some use of it, because it means the general ratepayer will pay less this year.
I just want to clarify that. So the use of reserves as per table 1 on page 9 in the report is what we're talking about.
Sorry, let me clarify. I've probably got that wrong. Maybe the 3 and 4 are different. I mean, it's all about reserves, but specific reserves, and then there's, I think we're talking about biosecurity and land sus reserves. I sort of thought they're all the same, but so we need to alter that.
Is that right then? Are we talking about the reserves set out in table 1, or are we talking about other reserves as well?
I'll get Rachel just to clarify.
Through you, Chair, perhaps to make it even clearer, it could be agree the use of reserves as set out in table 1 of the report, and that does cover not only the lease area reserves, but also the accumulated surpluses from biosecurity and land sustainability and some changes in the asset reserve. The paper that was tabled today has an additional recommendation, which is about agreeing or not agreeing the 450k of surpluses per annum in addition to those reserves usages that we've just discussed.
So we're voting on what's set out in table 1 and not the 450, or is it both?
That would include the 450?
As a separate resolution.
You got it separate. Okay.
Sorry, I'm sort of asked about here a wee bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lance. Because can we do the use of can we vote number 3? That's the catchment discussion we've had about the use of that. Then there's the other reserves, because there may be a couple of comments about the other reserves. So is that, can we
Seconder, happy to vote it on just on 3 at this stage? Is Neville?
Neville?
Yes.
Okay, after that clarification, we will put the vote on 3, which is to consider the feedback from the catchment liaison committee regarding the proposed use of reserves. All in favour will say aye. Aye. No, carried. We will now move to 4, which appears that it may need a slight amendment for clarification. Are you suggesting that we almost have a 4B or would it be 450?
Yes, so 4A would be agree the use of reserves as set out in table 1. 2024-2034 long-term plan, and 4B would be agree or not agree the use of 450,000 of lease area land surpluses per annum to fund the financing costs of the climate resilience projects.
Okay, everybody clear?
Other questions?
Okay.
Just in regards to the statement, I said, please using the biosecurity and land sustainability. I understand why the need maybe to have a bit of biosecurity reserve surplus, or just in case there is an incursion of some type. But I still think the land sustainable could be still using more. And I mean, I just challenged, we're not a bank. We don't hold much. This stuff was, it was targeted for certain things to be used, and it just hasn't been used. So there's, I'm pleased we're seeing it, but we can be doing more to this. And I don't necessarily agree to the, yeah, there's a bit of a rainy day now, and we'll deal with the rates in the future, whatever they may be. But at the moment, there is got money in the bank that should have been spent in some of these things more. So I'm just making a comment on that. A bit different to the view of looking for the rainy day down the road when it was raining. It's a storm at the moment. So it's my comment, but I'm happy to move.
Happy to move
or a second it, or
4A and 4A.
Yeah, are we doing the lease land 452? Was it?
Yeah.
Was it?
I think, yeah, so we're clear on that,
Yeah.
we're, so 4A is agreeing to the use of reserves as set out in,
Yeah.
I'll second that.
and B is to agree to use the 450,000 in this current year. So we moved and seconded. And I just think on the use of reserves, as Jeremy's pointed out, we have a targeted rate that actually, as we are doing now, is actually spending it where it should be, because those people paid for a specific purpose. And the second really is just about, we had a lot of comment from the public about how tough times were and urged us to use reserves, but the fact is there's only a number of reserves we have flexibility about. Most of them are locked in for specific purposes. Any further comment? If not, I will put 4A and 4B. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? No. Carried. Right. We will move to item 5. You want to comment on that, Rachel, which is to agree or not agree the council will not fund depreciation of the Cedar Creek pump station for the next 3 years.
So this comes from the deliberations on the 10th, and you might recall that there was a discussion around the fact that we're funding all of the flood protection capital expenditure from debt with no repayment of debt until year 3 of the long-term plan. However, there was depreciation budgeted for during years 1 and 2. And during deliberations, you discussed offsetting the impact on rates of the depreciation of the Stead pump station, noting that you were intending to do a review of reserve use in the next financial year. So the budget that's been put together and is contained in the draft documentation is based on not funding that depreciation. And we just need you to make a formal resolution in relation to that.
Alistair.
Can somebody clarify me what the total cost of Stead Street is? I've heard 9 million. The other day I heard 11 million. What is it?
I think you'll get a briefing on that later this morning. At the moment, it probably falls in the commercially sensitive.
Okay.
So I'm happy to move the resolution that we defer that for 3 years, given that the advice we got was it wasn't a big risk to the council to handle it in that manner. We won't fund depreciation for the first 3 years.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Morris, you'd like to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This wasn't the issue that was going to cause a problem with the audit, was it? No, it was something else. Okay.
It was clarified, wasn't it? Because there was a question at one stage as to whether that was going to cause us issues.
So yeah, I think we need to just have a conversation about this.
Morris's question was this going to not doing the depreciation for the 3 years going to compromise the audit?
No.
We talked about something causing a problem with the audit. I have no idea what this.
Sorry, that might have been preempting and creating a policy, a long-term commitment to the policy within the deliberations. So what we've on here is basically have said the next 3 years, which is within this first part of the LTP, that we will set aside funding for that, but specifically and only for Stead Street. We haven't yet made the policy, so we've agreed to come back to policy in total. So we've agreed to come back to look at all reserves and all renewal funding. And that was my suggestion, that we do that we look at all asset renewals long term. So the answer to the question is no, I don't believe it's a risk.
Thank you.
So thank you. Any further comment? I mean, this is an asset that's probably going to last for 70 or 80 years. So depreciation starting a few years late is certainly not going to affect our ability to deal with maintenance and replacement. So we won't be here anyway, Morris.
More positive than that, Morris.
So it's been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, we move to item 6, which is amend the financial reserves policy to clarify the catchment reserves, i.e. river area reserves and drainage reserves are to stay within the rating districts they are generated in and not be used in the general pool. Moved by Paul.
Yes, I can second it, but I think that we just need to advise on this, that this is not something that will go on forever. And it's something that should be reviewed from time to time, and we do have reviews of policy so that when the financial reserves policy comes up for review, we look at that. And the reason behind that is that people want to keep their money to themselves, but when they get a flood and we need to repair it, money comes from elsewhere in the region, from elsewhere in the country. Auckland ratepayers are paying for, the restoration of problems here, and we do that all over the country. So I think that we need to think about this pretty carefully and not set it in stone forever.
And I think our policy is that we do review every 2 to 3 years, which is absolutely vital in that. I've got Peter, then Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to back up what Norris just said. As we move and we are transitioning to a capital value, that we don't box ourselves in on some of these things right now.
Thanks, Peter. Robert.
Yeah, that was my point also, well said. Except you mentioned that some of these rates are targeted rates. Are all of them or just some of them under discussion?
Probably in particular, it is the biodiversity and the land sus where we actually collect a rate for a specific purpose as opposed to the general rate. So there was a certain amount of logic that the money should be spent in the area that we actually rate.
For the targeted rates, but they're not all.
No.
No, so that's correct.
Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded. You made a comment?
No.
No, you're right. We're all good. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, no. Carried. Right, we'll move to item 7, which is to approve the following draft council decisions. The budgets and the 2024 to 2034 long-term plan. Do you want to comment on this at all, Rachel, or is it?
Just to remind you, so these are a distillation of the conversations and deliberations over the 5th and 10th of June. So just, I guess, checking that we're reflecting what you've said during those discussions and deliberations correctly. The key things to highlight in terms of the budgets, you'll see on page 13, it shows the reduction and the rates increase from 23% to 12.6% for the coming year, followed by 12.9% the following year and 12.6% the year after. The infrastructure strategy, some key paragraphs to reflect deliberations are included on page 16. So noting that for the capital projects planned for years 1 to 3 of the long-term plan, Wellington, Manston and Waikato, full business cases are to be prepared and brought back to council before these can proceed. These projects are fully debt funded with no central government contribution. There's some discussion about the provisional capital works program from year 4 onwards, and noting that further consultation with the community will occur once this work's been planned. Obviously the focus for the next 3 years is improving their data and modelling, building expertise and capacity, and undertaking that planning work over the next 3 years. So just highlighting that provisional program and the fact that there'll be further consultation on that. In terms of the last decision, which is the rating review, again, probably the pertinent part, page 20, where council has agreed to a transition and setting out the detail of that transition. So you can see towards the bottom of page 20 the difference from from status quo to year 1 to year 2.
Thanks, Rachel. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I've got a few comments to make on the I think they'll come up under number 9. There's a few alterations I think are needed to the long-term plan. That the infrastructure strategy set out on page 20, I think it was, Rachel, is that right? Sorry. Yes, on page 16 actually, where it talks about the capital projects for the Winton, Lunsden, Waikato. I know that we're looking at other things such as slow the flow, but these 3 projects have been given a lot of emphasis. But in fact, it may be that to protect people in the communities, for example, in the Ariti, you put up new stock banks or protect places upstream, that might be causing more problems for people downstream. And I would like to see something in there, if it's not already there, that we need to consider slow the flow projects equally with these other projects, and that one is not given priority over the other. Can I be reassured that that is the case?
Well, that's certainly my position too, Robert, and I think probably a lot of others around the room, that some of the modelling work we need to do across entire catchments to give us one priority, but actually this way of doing it, we got strong feedback from the public about debt funding. Those three projects at the moment do not attract government funding. So it's one of the reasons I was reluctant initially for the amount of money we spend on modelling and staff, but it's actually essential, I believe. And I think we've got to be quite clear that while we have provision for debt in this budget, none of it will be spent without a case that comes back to council to actually approve.
But are there words in here that say that?
Well, if there aren't, I'm happy to have an amendment to make sure that's clear. Paul, you might like to.
Yeah, maybe if I could, within the infrastructure strategy, it does speak to the need to consider alternative infrastructure. The link to that and the business case that the chair is alluding to, we have to be able, we will have to, we're growing in our knowledge around modelling, and that modelling will have to be able to demonstrate what will happen up and below the catchment. And that modelling will be able to help us make decisions around where the best use. So the infrastructure strategy says we've identified the areas that we want to protect and invest in, but the solution could be not stop lines. The solution could be some other things. So that's the business case or the work programme that you as council will ultimately sign off on. So we've been really clear to say, yes, we've identified priorities. No doubt there'll be more priorities as we go through the process, but in terms of the assurances council will need, you will receive a business case that will articulate how that modelling demonstrates the risk and what the mitigation could be. And it quite conceivably could be that there is a natural solution rather than a built solution. So presumably, some of those natural solutions could be a lot cheaper than the built solutions as well. So we would need to be open-minded to that possibility.
Thank you.
I've got Peter, Robert, and Jeremy.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Peter.
I just want to confirm, just like Morris, that we're sitting here as a council and we need to keep our eyes on the horizon of where we're moving to. So I'll just read at the top of page 21, just to confirm the move to capital value over the 2 years was confirmed. So we're quite clear on that as a council, aren't we? Excluding the well catchment rating district. Then it says council indicated it wished to undertake further consultation regarding whether river management is regionally or locally funded over the long term, eventually rated based on location. So my question is just to fully confirm that that first sentence is true and correct. It's noted the move to capital value over the 2 years was confirmed. Because things can become opaque around the table here sometimes after lengthy discussion, and I just want to reiterate that right here and now.
That was Peter's submission, Chairman. We've discussed it, but we hadn't actually made a decision as I recall. Again, will tell us if we did.
Last meeting.
We've had several discussions. And
Rachel,
please, I raised it.
Rachel, let's give us some clarification. Then
So through you, the detail on page 20, and there was a resolution in relation to this, is showing essentially, if you look in brackets, we have whether things are land value, capital value, and you can see by the end of year 2, it is capital value brackets. So
I realise that, but I did think that we discussed it was a transition with consultation the first year. So it was transition with consultation. So with consultation doesn't mean to confirm.
Not on the CV.
No, I think you need to.
June if you want me to find it.
So I would suggest that we actually get what was decided read back to you, councillors, because I think that's critical at this point in the conversation. Are you suggesting, Jan, that we need to adjourn while you
Just for a few minutes?
Yeah, so the cup of tea board. The chair, are you amenable to that, and we'll be able to get.
Okay, let's have a
what we've
10-minute
actually decided
break for a
really
little bit of caffeine and come back to that. To the deliberations, after that coffee break, and I'll pass over to Rachel just to clarify the question that we did break to get some clarity on.
So thank you, Chair. For the council paper for the 10th of June, there was a recommendation that set out the proposed transitional arrangements. That was recommendation 5. We have the draft minutes of that meeting, which state capital value will be off the table going forward. In terms of the consultation, the percentages will be the discussion. So, for example, in papers here, page 20, you can see for river management, excluding the YO, the status quo is 70% target rate based on land value, 30% general rate capital value. Year 1 will be 50% targeted rate land value and 50% general rate capital value. And what the discussion and the notes suggest is that the capital value component will be off the table, but it will be that regional or local aspect, and what percentages local versus region that would be the discussion. The resolution was moved, a recommendation was moved and seconded, with Councillor Evans voting against.
I do recall that, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, just that was the question that I asked. So, just to be clear, it is not set, that horizon is not set towards capital value. Is that what you're saying?
We are indicating the notes from the meeting suggest that the capital value is not up for discussion.
You have made that decision at the last meeting. There were 3 matters that you were still open for discussion and decision next year, and that was the percentage split of the rate, the use of differential rating, and the regional versus catchment based rating. Those were the matters that were still for discussion again next year consideration.
And that was based on a education program or a familiarisation, whatever you like to call it, going out to the community, as I remember.
What I just say further is just to finish off that firmly believe that move to that capital value, that transition is really important to unlock the work that needs to be done in the catchments into the future. And I would also say that in hindsight, it's been clear that we haven't really communicated that well to the community. We're talking about a once in a generational shift of rate share. Although we understood it in this council pretty well, we didn't quite get our point across.
Thanks, Peter. We've got Robert, Jeremy, Alistair, then Morris. Robert.
I didn't do it.
Okay, it was before you were right. Jeremy.
Yeah, just in regards to a couple of things, I'm just trying to catch my notes again, sorry. Who's the next person? Sorry, I'm just trying to form move on to the next person.
Okay,
sorry. No, I'll come back.
We'll go to Alistair and come back to you. Sorry. Alistair.
I do have a concern because in our long-term budgets, we have a debt level that we are unable to change. Because if we did change it, we had to go to the auditors and redo the whole thing. So how are we going to communicate that to our constituents so they understand it?
I think that's a very good point. It's something that I've been concerned about too, Alistair. So I think we should view that as a line of credit. We don't have to use it, but if the opportunity comes up for government funding, we've got a line of credit that'll be available. We've got strong feedback from the public. They didn't want us spending that sort of money on flood resilience, and we as a council will make decisions on each one as it comes up. They'll be done at that stage. So while that line stays there, and for some reason, yeah, it's higher than perhaps we would like, but without going through a very difficult process and being rewarded, we're sitting there, but I think we can give assurance to the public. We have made no decisions to spend that money. We will do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes, I'm happy with what you're saying, but we've got to be able to communicate it out there. We didn't do well in our LTP communications. So we've got to get it right this time, or it's us that don't look terribly good. So how are we going to do it? Could we need a plan to come back to us to show us how that's going to happen?
And I think it'll be in the document we put out, and whether it's in the forward from Wilma in the south, or whether it's in the discussion that Paul was talking about before, that we make it quite clear that we are not committed to any expenditure until we've had the business case and governance actually make that decision. Would that satisfy you if there's some clarity there?
It's going to have to, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that we're just talking about the capital expenditure. One of my biggest issues was the clarity around the debt is a huge thing. We've got 5% basically rise in our rates because of the basically in theory the blowouts in regards to projects shovel ready around capital expenditure, and when we sort of got down to the nuts and bolts and realised that the next 3 years we're going to be debt funding these projects, another 14 million or thereabouts. This is just going to be some pretty big hikes, and the public needs to understand that, and that's where the chair has indicated that through the discussions that we are not, they may be there, but they are not a guarantee that they're going to get done unless the business case is really stacked up. Me personally, they needed to be government. Everything needs to have a bit of a share from the government. Also, back Morris's, Councillor Rodway's discussion around we need to be seriously looking at different options. The money we're going to spend looking into this infrastructure strategy was phenomenal, and I think we have other options that would really probably would seriously stack up financially a lot better. So yeah, so we need clarity. I'm probably a wee bit negative towards the infrastructure strategy on that basis, and but I know we need to be indicating to government that we could do with some money down here too in their budget. So we're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. We're buggered if we put them in, and we're buggered if we don't too. So, but I'm still a wee bit negative of where how this infrastructure really will play out. But there's going to be a lot of discussion in the near future around this. Just in regards to, I was just going through when we were talking about the funding analysis, and also the decrease of UAGC is not exactly for me very positive. Even the change in rating system where we're dealing with saying that we want the whole community will pay for some of this stuff, and we have a system where through the UAGC it can be very effective that everyone puts a bit into the pot. But we're effectively shutting that down, even though we're saying everybody benefits from this. So that's sort of a bit of a contradiction in how we rate too. So, so that's my little bit on that. Thank you.
Morris.
I'll refrain from talking about UAGC till a bit later on. I just want to make sure that it's perfectly clear to people who read this. So we're talking about river management going from year 1, 50% targeted rate, year 2, 100% new targeted rate. But down the explanation at the bottom of page 20, and then down on page 21, page 20 talks about differentials. It's not clear exactly what it is. Although it's further explained a little bit on the next page. And my understanding from our discussion was that for the river management rates, that we were going to talk about, and I think it's explained there, so it's just really to make sure that I understand it properly, that we are talking about using differentials, which I understand to mean that if you are beside the river and you get more of a benefit than somebody who is farther away from the river from particular river management activities, then you would be expected to pay a bit more, even though it's not strictly the original capital value approach. So if my understanding is correct, then I'm comfortable with that. But perhaps Tony could perhaps clarify.
Thank you, Councillor and Chair. The statement was, and I think one read it out, that we will go back to the community and that will be one of the considerations as location differential. Is that something that the community wish to discuss? There was some submissions on that. Was equally Councillor Pemberton had the alternative view, which is there's a cost. So it's a very complex subject, and what we're committing to is going back to the community and saying, do you want to have that discussion again on differentials for location? And the other one that came through very strongly was a local element as retaining the catchment rating of some type versus a regional. So I see those, and from what the discussions that we've heard, have written those into that, and the council decided that at the last meeting that we would revisit those. There's primarily two things: the local versus regional, and when you do that, there needs to be a percentage. If you go that way, and then the other one is was from Councillor McPhail, was representing those people who said they'd like to revisit whether we should be looking at retaining some type of differential for a location.
Okay.
It's not agreed, it's for discussion.
Sure, yeah. No, that's as long as it's open to do that.
I've got Peter, Robert and myself.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just want to caution on going back to where we were. The original, when we talked about this, was doing away with the complexity with those 140 targeted catchment rates. Now, I'm sure 40 years ago they sat in this room or wherever they sat and had a simple way of going forward, but then it became more complex and more bespoke adjustments around everything. We need to manage that in such a way that we don't end up at the starting point again. So that's just a warning to this council. Just want to ask a question too, and another thing, if I could, Mr. Chairman. So I'm seeing on page 13 the overall impact. So this is normally what gets put on the front page of the paper, is just the rate rise. And I'm asking this question for the general public too, you could say. So at that 12.6 to 2024-25, what reduction has our earlier decision around the use of surpluses and reserves? What has that brought that down? What would have that been? Probably in the first year and the 2 other years. Can you just to clarify for people of what we were talking about earlier today, of what sort of impact that would have?
The first year is 4%, Chair.
4%.
The second year is
Fractionally below, but pretty much 4%, just looking to that table. So, yeah.
so the numbers and the percentages are difficult because the number goes up. It's closer to 4% again on a higher number, on a higher rate.
So look, I would suggest that is quite significant. That's quite a significant saving that we found as a council, and it was well worth asking that question of the committees themselves.
It's better I've got Robert than myself.
Yeah,
Robert.
no, my question was answered. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to say that. But yes, it is about actually going back to Peter's question, I mean, we did get considerable feedback. We sort of basically proposed going from 140 different catchment rates to a flat rate where everybody paid the same. We've got quite a bit of feedback to say there is a direct benefit, maybe an indirect benefit, but it'll be if that's where we end up. The principle that everybody contributes, I think, is well, we've established that. So it's really about the areas that perhaps get more benefit than others, but it can be, we'll have that discussion going forward. But I'm envisaging you've got a certain amount of money within a catchment to, you need, it can be quite a simple thing instead of the very convoluted and contradictory system we've got at the moment. I'm confident we'll come up with something that is fair. So, anything further on that?
We're at a stage, Chairman, where we can vote on item 7.
We may want to split it. Do we want to split it into 1, 2, or 3 on item 7? Because bottom one, we've got a couple of people who probably are going to. Where's my list? Go back to the start.
I think there's too much in 7 to include it all as one. I think we do need to split it.
Yes, we're probably at the stage where we could say it's A, B, and C, that we do. Somebody would like to move 7A?
Well, yes, A and B.
We can probably do that.
No.
No,
No.
Do them one by one. I think that's the.
Ask for an amendment.
Can we, I'll move that they be put 7A, B, C as in.
And I'll second that.
Please.
Okay, I'll put that to the meeting. All in favour, say aye.
What's the motion, please, Chairman?
That we vote on those items individually. So it's so it's
7A, 7B, and 7C.
so first up would be budgets and 2024-2034 long-term plan. Somebody happy to move A?
Scared to move
it. Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Alice, are the way he's looking.
Oh, thanks. I didn't move, was it?
Moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion?
Just to note,
Morris.
Mr. Chairman, there are a few minor errors in the long-term plan that I assume we can talk to under number 9.
9, yep. So Rachel's indicating we can. Okay, any further discussion?
I can make a suggestion in that case. So the draft council decisions, if there is still further discussion to be had on matters that are going to relate to those, I would suggest, Chair, that we move to the other matters first and then come back and move and approve item 7. Rachel, are you happy with that? Do you think that is sensible?
So item 7 is really around the wording of the council decisions, and then item 9 is the draft LTP itself, but it would make sense to make sure we've dealt with everything before we come back to the draft decisions.
Okay, so this is about the wording, not about the adoption, which is the last. So I just want to be clear about the councillors are clear about what it is they're voting on. So do you want to just clarify that again?
So the draft decisions, we're seeking council approval of those to make sure you're comfortable with the wording that's contained in those.
So you're asking for approval of the wording which relates to page
So
20.
essentially, from page 7,
That's right through to page 21.
through to, yeah,
Page
21.
21, sorry, not page 20, so through to page 21.
Do you want to everything or nothing?
So the question I have is it possible for councillors to do that without having approved the actual budgets?
From what Morris was indicating, his changes are minor. They're just
Well, I'm happy to go through those, Mr. Chairman.
Should we take those now then, I think? Yes, thank you.
okay. So we'll let that motion lie on the table for a moment, and we'll move to item 9, which is approving the real budget.
I don't think we're moving to item 9, but I think we're taking councillor Rodway's commentary on item 7A.
Right.
Right. So we're not moving to item 9. So it's
7A is still on the table.
Still on the table, and so you've got a list of,
Yeah, just, so on page 18, in my document anyway, got the number 27 underneath the 1, 2, 3 there, partway down. Simply there.
Oh, yeah.
which document?
This is this one.
What paragraph are we on?
So on page 18, in the middle, there's a random number 27.
Oh, right, okay, see that, yep.
Oh, actually, sorry, I see it continues on to page 20. There's been some odd numbers just pop into the document. Yeah, this is in the draft council decision, not the draft LTP.
These are decisions, not necessarily.
Yeah, I was going to say something about UAGC, but I won't take too long. Page 22. This was an issue that came up in submissions, and I think should perhaps be expanded on a bit. The second paragraph under consultation, the last sentence of that paragraph says, in addition, ratepayers with the most significant impacts in terms of dollar increases were identified and briefed. There was quite a lot of discussion about that, and people thought they weren't briefed enough. And I just wonder if we should expand on that a bit, say exactly what did happen there.
It's outside the decisions paper.
This is the next item 7.2, sorry, if we've been unclear. So the documents that we're looking at the moment go through to page 21.
All right, that's item 7.2. Oh, yeah, okay. Right, that's all I've got to say up to page item 7.2.
Okay, so having clarified those matters, we can return to the motion for that was 7.8, wasn't it? So we had moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All in favour will say
That
aye.
is 7A you're putting there.
7A.
Yep.
All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Paul was recording his no. Okay, we can now move to 7B.
I tried to move.
On my page.
Didn't get a second.
Discussion?
Clarify the page numbers for the councillors, please.
So we're talking about the draft decision on the infrastructure strategy, and it runs from
16.
page 15 through to page 17.
I'll put the motion, Kim. and we'll think about second,
Moved. You seconding? Any discussion on B? I'm not seeing any. So I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye for 7B.
Aye.
Aye. Against? No. Jeremy is recording against, specifically on the annual uniform charges. It was
Just
Just
against.
Okay.
Through this.
Right. We'll now move to C, which is revenue and financing and rating review.
Next pages 18 to 21, I'm noting the matter that Councillor Robbo raised with the numbers appearing randomly.
It's item 7.2 now with you.
That's 7C, revenue and financing policy and rating review draft decision.
Okay, any debate on revenue and finance policy? So is this the one where we have a couple of people who are going to abstain, or? Are we
I'm sorry.
mover? So do we have a mover for?
I'll move it, Chairman.
Neville has moved. And I thought, did you second that one or not, Peter? I can't remember.
No.
You didn't, okay, that's fine. Seconded for C.
Does that mean, Mr. Chairman, no one wants to discuss it? Or they're all opposed?
Well,
I will second it from the chair, so it's been moved and seconded, it's now open for debate. That's the revenue advice, financing policy and rating review. Which is on pages 18 to 21. Peter.
Yeah, just make a general comment if I could. I was a proponent of a move to the capital value rating system, the transition. While I'm not in favour of that because of the complexity, I do understand it's the wish of the council. So I'll support this.
Any further comments on the policy? Jeremy.
Look, I think we've got to move into the CV, the rating review. This is something that's been coming along. A lot of other councils are doing it. But obviously, I won't mention it, but there's obviously other ways of funding too within a rating system. But I know this is it's heading in the right direction anyway. I mean, we'll hopefully get there in the next year or so. So leave it as it is.
So I've got, I agree with portions, but not all. So, even though it was a rating review, as Jeremy said, we haven't reviewed where it comes from, especially page 18, item 3, halfway down. So, I would be voting no.
I'll just comment on this process. In the time I've been in this building, I think we've had the courage to look at everything this year. In some ways, that's possibly caused a wee bit of confusion on the public because we did look at everything. But we have a genuine desire to make sure that things were fair and fit for purpose. And we're now deciding to actually transition on some of these things and have more conversations. But the world has changed since we started this LTP, and that's causes a few issues. But I think we've had the courage to ask staff to bring alternatives to the table. And the rating system is pretty clunky, and you haven't got very many levers to pull. We're conscious that the rate burden is huge out there at the moment, and I believe we have a genuine desire to try and do what we could to make the system fairer. And it'll be an ongoing process, but we're on a journey, and I'm really as comfortable as I can be with where we were going to land on how we've been. But Paul, then Phil.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying, Chair. I don't believe we have done everything we could, and I believe we need to over the next long period of time, however long I'm here or not. So I believe there's a lot more that we can do. So I'll just leave it at that.
Jeremy.
I think in this discussion, and it's come out quite clear that we've thrown a lot at the public in this long-term plan. There's a lot going on in the community anyway with our councils throwing their rates. And in hindsight, it's easy to work out the best perfect system. But rating's reasonably complicated as it is, and obviously we've had some major, lumping it all together with a big rate increase as it's pretty hard to get your head around it at times, and even for some of us around here, we're living and breathing it. It's posed lots of questions, so I do feel for the community as we work through this, but that's easy to say that in hindsight we could have done a lot, made it a lot easier if we separated, but we have done what we have done. I think we come out with a transition period where we can hopefully bring the community along, explain, and probably from a consultative point of view, it starts tomorrow for the next year. We've got to be, let's get out there and implement this and bring them on board. And we've got probably a few more questions still here, and we need to make sure we're asking the right questions to get the answers we need to. So, move on.
Alistair.
Once again, it's how we communicate this thing and get it through, so our constituents actually know and understand what we're doing and our endpoint, which we have not done well at that.
Peter, then Robert.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to back up Jeremy what he said about, he just said, maybe we have to look outside of the LTP or at those sort of confines of communicating around, because the rates proposal was a once in a generation change. Let's be clear about that. And I don't think, this is my view, that we as a council had enough time, or we didn't effectively communicate what collective benefit is to the region. It's something that we never really pushed out there, and I think if we were more effective in talking about collective benefit, people would get what we're moving towards. So, yeah.
Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, my feeling about the process is that it has been exceptionally challenging, and that staff have done an exceptional job with the proposals that they came up with. And I think we as councillors, we've done all right in representing our constituents and getting our head around all of these complex matters. And I think that your comment, Mr. Chairman, that there's more to be done and that you've taken a brave step sums it up perfectly.
Thanks, Rod. Any further comments? If not, we've been moved and seconded. I will put 7C, revenue and financing policy and rate of review. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? All. No. Right, we'll move to item 8, which is direct staff to prepare responses to individual submissions on the 2024 to 34 long-term plan, consultation document and associated documents based on the approved council decisions. You want to comment on that, Rachel?
Just perhaps to add, councillors will be familiar with the summary of submissions. What this is bringing the approved decisions into that, so individual submitters can see how their concerns have been taken on board. There is some operational matters that have been raised in those submissions, so we can include some of that or have already started to form draft responses, which we can now confirm that respond to those operational matters as well.
Moved. Question or seconding?
I know, I'm not checking it right at this moment. Is that all going out to our ratepayers through our email system so they all get it?
We write, for you, Chair, we write to each individual submitter with a response.
Yeah, but do we go the next step to all ratepayers?
There will definitely be communications going out following this meeting and ongoing around where the council is needed.
So how do they go out? Because we've got to somehow at least get 80% of them.
Right.
I believe, if not 90.
So the motion, Chairman, is to respond to individual submissions. That's a different topic.
Yes.
And for timeframes, we will see this before it goes out, I'm assuming. So
that's right. So we'll now put together the individual responses, finalise those, and put that up to the council meeting on the 10th of July when you adopt the LTP. We'll let the submitters know what the process is and the availability of these particular high-level decisions that you've already made.
Jeremy.
Yeah, so just to clarify that, obviously we write to the submitters, and if the questions have asked that we answer, lots of questions, we're also clearly stating the decisions made on there. Can you also just make sure they're obviously the ones that have an interest about what looking ahead in the next year or the process, this is one way of getting people's information to them and looking ahead and just giving a heads up. There are the next 12 months will be more decisions to be coming back to them.
Well, it's important that people who went to the trouble to submit get the reply, and obviously we do publicity about where we've landed on the LTP for the general public, but this is part of the democratic process and it's acknowledgement of whether they agree with the decision or not, at least they get that personal response, which is important.
So just one last thing, Chair, sorry. So I just want to confirm, after this process today, we've gone through deliberations and I can then discuss with concerned ratepayers after this.
It's correct. The draft document will go to audit and we'll approve it next month, but the deliberations will be concluded.
Just on that, Mr. Chairman, once the council makes a decision, we councillors are bound to support that decision. Is that not correct?
Yeah, well, it's
No, not if
people
vote.
can object at the time, but actually we support the majority decision, basically.
So all councillors are bound. I think there are rules around this, the collective responsibility as a council. We can't go out then and say, oh, I didn't agree with it and you should do this. We're not to do that, as I understand. Somebody will know in our book of behaviours.
Sorry,
Sure, that's
that
correct.
may be a presumption by Councillor Guyton. That's not what I was saying. I've had situations during the deliberations where I haven't been able to talk to ratepayers, and I've made it really clear to them that I cannot. The question is, after this today, I can talk to those ratepayers. This is the end of the deliberations. Yes.
Yes, the meeting, we'll have made the decisions today, and okay, we ratify it in July, but actually
assumption that
decisions are made.
The assumptions about how or what I will say, I'll leave it at that.
And at the end of the day, people have got their own personal opinions. We support the majority decision, but it doesn't mean that we have to go and say, oh no, I can't talk about it, because we can't enforce it anyway. So, but at the end of the day, we'll have made a decision and we move forward. Okay.
I need a seconder for
We've
that.
got
No
over
seconder for that, Chairman.
seconded by Alistair.
You and I.
Any further discussion? I will put the motion as item 8 to direct staff to prepare responses to the individual submitters. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carry. Right, we'll move to item 9, which is to approve the draft 2024-34 long-term plan for audit and agree with the executive making any minor changes needed following the meeting.
Chair, I have a minor change to propose to the LTP myself. And, I'm very happy to.
We'll probably do that now, will we?
Right, so to the point that's been raised by a number of councillors this morning, to be absolutely clear on the matters of commitment or no commitment to the debt, that this is a matter that comes back to council for decision, that this debt is not a commitment to spend the potentially forecast debt. I've sought advice on just making it clear that you are not committing to that expenditure. So on page 69 of your LTP document, I'm proposing the following amendment, which I am assured is in line with, does not make a fundamental change to this document from an audit perspective, but I think may provide some comfort to councillors. And so if you have the document in front of you, page 69, not the actual LTP.
This is the coloured document. I haven't brought in with me, but I think most people have got their copies.
Right. Chair, I will sit with you and share the document. So on page 69 of the LTP document, this is the infrastructure strategy. And there is, on this page, matters relating to managing the issues of asset management. And in the second paragraph, it currently reads 190 million of capital renewals will take place over the next 30 years. And so just for clarification, that I'm proposing should be changed to up to 190 million of capital renewals may take place over the next 30 years. That has that is not going to trigger any change in our audit of the LTP.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So we've heard the amendment, and that does give me some degree of comfort. Any discussion on that?
Does it require a motion, Chairman?
It probably doesn't, because I think it falls within the gambit of Chief Executive making minor corrections. I would say that's a minor correction of clarity.
You may want to make an explicit change to that, given that this is a matter that you discussed.
Well, I'm certainly happy to move that we do have the Chief Executive to make that change.
I'll second it, Chairman.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. So does that take us back to the full motion, which is to approve the 24-34 long-term plan for audit and agree with the Chief Executive making minor corrections needed following. Any discussion?
We just need to add the word to and after agree to actually.
Good spotting. Two. Rachel.
Through you, Chair, just to let you know that some of the minor corrections that we would be making, we note there's reference to statistics in places in the document, and particularly would update those to refer to the last census results which have come through recently. Similarly, just double checking some of the legislation references and making sure there's no changes that have occurred there. And lastly, in terms of minor corrections, there is still a forecasting assumption based on the closure or potential closure of the aluminium smelter, which needs corrected. And then Tanya will talk about some more substantive matters.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Chair. I just want to draw the councillor's attention to the fact that this document has the updated budgets. So they are the final budgets based on the decisions that was presumptive, but based on the decisions that you've made today. And they are on page pages when I'm looking. Let's start with the strategies then. We've had to make some minor changes to the strategies and the policies to reflect the change in the change from the consultation document. So the supporting documents that went out with the consultation document included the financial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, the revenue influencing policy, and the funding needs analysis. Along the way, councillors have decided to move from the financial strategy suggested that we were going to continue to build reserves this year. So the new financial strategy, hoping that you've read it, had the opportunity to read it, discusses the fact that we've heard from the submitters and that we've chosen to use reserves. So that needs to be reflected. It is a change in our strategy, and that's been reflected in the wording, rewording of the financial strategy. The funding needs analysis has been changed to reflect, again, originally said 140 rates will be replaced by one rate. It now says what we've decided here today, that there will be 4 components and how we're going to fund each of those. So the funding needs analysis is updated to reflect your decision today. The revenue and financing policy, which is a summary of the funding needs analysis and the outcome, has been changed similarly to reflect that same table that you debated today. There has been some wording at the beginning of the infrastructure strategy that referred to how we fund, and that too has been tied in by Stephen to have similar terms and reference the same funding. Chair, I believe that unless I've missed anything that Stephen might correct me on, they are the substantive changes to the policies and the strategies, complete with updated graphs, of course, to reflect that. And then I was looking for the forecasting assumptions. I see needs amendment on page 109. The future of NZAS needs to be updated. And then, Chair, we're looking at the financials from page 85. The financials on page 85, just reminding councillors that year one there's a deficit of 1166. It's a decision by council to use the reserves for funding that we've discussed. So while we've also discussed, while we've discussed the use of leasehold reserves in surpluses, you might remember that there was a need to use marine reserve as well for the reduction. So the combined use of reserves will have us in year one recording the operating or total surplus of, so total deficit of 1166, increasing slowly in year two, and then coming out in year three, where we potentially have received government funds. The changes in the cash flow and the balance sheet reflect these same decisions. The benchmarks have been updated, so they're page 90. So these are our what we call our regulatory benchmarks, and the council as well within its benchmarks. Page 94 is the actual rates that will be struck, rating impact statement, detailing again the decisions made today. So you'll see there's still the majority of all those rates that we have had in the past are still in that statement. We have sample rates then, and on page 106 we have a schedule of reserve movements that shows the changes that we've discussed in and out of those reserves. We've discussed there's a need for an update on page 106. And on page 114, there's a schedule for allocations of the marine fees in the first 3 years.
Paul, you've got a question?
Yes, thank you for that, Tanya. Just going back to what Rachel said regarding page 10, the census details. The adjustment you're going to make is that it adds up to 113.8%, not 100%.
That's a correction we can make.
Yeah, because, you know, sort of 100% is 100%. And with regards to ratifying, well, with approving this, and when we get to the point, can you give me, or can you give our ratepayers a timeline of when you'll be updating the rates calculator online for them to be able to, with the alterations that we've done, to peruse what the rates are going to go up by? Can you give me a timeline?
So just to come back first to percentages, Dave, you had something to say there?
Yes, through you, Chair. I believe that I'll double check, but due to people being able to select more than one ethnicity, then the total in terms of it may not get up to 100%.
Well, it's irrelevant information.
This has happened before, actually, with the sense to be doubled up with Kiwi Pacific.
We'll review in terms of what we can provide as a meaningful.
And it's through the census. Wow. Okay, cool.
So the second question was when can people go to the, would it be after the 6th of July or before?
So if we put something up now, we need to be very careful in wording that we're still going through audit and council still to adopt the final long-term plan. But yes, the intention is to put a new rates calculator up so people can see the impact of the council's decision. We had intended that be post your final decision in July. But if you wish us to do something sooner, we can look at that, but we just have to be very careful about the wording.
Do we need to move that and second that? Because, or is that just an operational thing, Wilma?
In terms of amending?
I mean, changing the rates calculator so that it can reflect what the decision has been made instead of what was in the proposal.
Yeah, I think it's that.
It gives our ratepayers some confidence.
So we discussed, I think, at the last meeting doing this, and the purpose was to ensure that we had the decisions first before we did that. So now that we do, I think that's absolutely sensible.
Thank you.
That's just to really feel about 2 weeks for us to get that all updated online.
It'd be good to share that and allow us to say,
So it might be,
pointed it out to our ratepayers.
I would be removing the rates calculator in its current state.
Thank you.
It's already gone. It's gone. Good, thank you, because we did discuss that last week. Thank you for doing that.
So you got more there, Tanya, or you?
I'm communicating with Stephen, just checking if there was anything I missed.
If Stephen wants to comment, he's certainly welcome to.
Yes, I did ask him actually if there was anything he wanted to add.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, Tanya, did you cover the financial strategy?
Yes, I did.
You
I
did?
mentioned we changed it, pivoted because of the use of reserves, but you can expand on that if you wish, Stephen.
Yeah, a massive change to the financial strategy from what council adopted in the draft consultation document. We started out with the consultation document looking to build resilience, and that was the essence of the narrative. And it's been rewritten substantially to reflect what we heard from the community and the challenges businesses and households are having, and then recognising instead of building our reserves, we were using our reserves because now was the time to use it. So that has been reflected significantly throughout the document, and the piece that's going to come up to us, come back to council when it's time to adopt the LTP, is about resilience, about prudence, and has council been prudent in making the decisions that are part of that? And so there's a statement there that we aren't balancing the books every year in the LTP, and we see that in the graph 1 on page 46 of the document. And so this is a matter that obviously the auditors and others will be concerned about, and that's because we're using reserves, and so it's really important that in the statement above on the bottom of page 45, council does not balance its books in year 1. This is largely due to financial reserves to fund some operating costs. We consider this approach to be prudent. The period of time we do not balance the books is short, and our rationale for doing this is now is the rainy day to use these reserves funds for that purpose. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention.
Thanks for that, Stephen. So we move anything there, or we've got 7.2 now?
We need to move item 9.
Item 9.
Okay. Item 9, did we have a, I think we can have the overs. Peter?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment on what Stephen just said?
Okay, yep.
Okay, thanks. Stephen used the words massive change from the consultation document. I think it must be said that we started, there's about 15, 16 workshops ago, just about probably a year ago on this plan. And it's fair to say the country and the community is quite a bit more different in the way they look at the world. And so we've reacted to that as a council. I can see that we have to those actions made quite an impact on us. So the change may not be enough for some, and it may be too much for others. It's just what I want to say at this point.
Thanks, Peter. And I think we have been prudent. We're actually listening to the Reserve Bank Governor and the government saying we want inflationary pressures out of the system, and we've done what we can. But do we have a mover for item 9? Moved by Neville, seconded by Alistair. I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. That's no carried. Okay, we will now move to 7.2, which is long-term plan, operational and other. 3 recommendations. Morris, this is where you have had a wording.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On that first page, maybe we could expand on that issue about, ratepayers with the most impact in terms of dollar increases were identified and briefed. Given that it was a bit of a contentious issue for a number of committees, I wonder if we could change the word brief to something a bit more specific.
What if we just finish it in identified?
Well, I think it's important to say that we did communicate with those people.
Engaged.
We hear differing levels, I guess, of briefings. Those large, very large industries, if you like, were directly contacted. We held one-on-one meetings, obviously went to the other councillors and spoke, and letters to others. So it's been a bit clearer and expanding on what exactly was done as something we can build into that.
You're right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other issues on 7.2, Morris?
No, that was all on 7.2, thank you.
Any general comments from staff on 7.2?
Just to highlight the appendices, I know there were some councillors about, and they highlight PEPS area in particular, so that monitoring activity that we're undertaking in that area is summarised on page 28 and 29 and will be provided to the relevant submitters.
I'm happy to move the recommendations, Chairman.
Moved by Morris. Seconder for 7.2, so you're moving 1, 2 and 3.
I think that's so, if that's all right.
Yep. We have a seconder for that, so that's receive the report, approve the use of the report to inform responses to submitters and direct staff to respond to submitted requests and concerns regarding the operation of work as part of responses to submitters.
I would second that. I
Seconded by
say
Paul.
aye to that.
Any further discussion? If not, I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. We move to 7.3, fees and charges deliberations.
Through you, Chair, opportunity to deliberate on, and further to that, we are recommending that the following deliberation, that the fees and charges schedule is adopted in this meeting. We are, I just wanted to note that we are able to independently adopt the fees and charges schedule from the long-term plan itself and the supporting documents, and just wanted to provide the rationale for doing that, and that is to ensure an efficient and effective transfer to the new fees and charges for the team and staff, so that can come into play as of the 1st of July. Just a couple of notes in regard to the schedule itself, and if it were to be adopted today, that the published copy, it will look slightly different to that which you received in the pack, due to the document you received in the pack having a comparison of the current year's figures to the proposed figures for fees and charges, and the public copy will not have the comparison comparison to the current years and will also include the GST component. So that's just a piece of clarity. In terms of the process to get to the fees and charges schedule, it is noted in the paper that a thorough review was undertaken of the schedule in 2023 and 24, which would have been discussed around the council table, and really highlight that in paragraph 2 on page 32, that what was included in the review and what guided the review for the 2024 and 25 fees and charges schedule was it wasn't just inflationary adjustments. There was really a strategic intent to move over time to a more risk-based approach to our monitoring and compliance and all of the associated tools and systems that are required to do that. In terms of submissions that we received on the schedule itself, not a huge number of submissions, 17 in total. There were 3 comments based on the fees being too high, 2 which links to other submissions on other areas of consultation, commenting on council expenditure, and then there's bullet points of the other various aspects of the feedback that we received as part of the consultation. The statement of proposal that was outlined and brought to council on the 27th of March as part of the recommendation, the resolution to enable the fees and charges schedule to be consulted on, outlines all of the changes from the 2023 to 24 schedule to the proposed schedule. I just wanted to highlight several further changes that have been proposed by staff following that resolution, and that is based on a few things. So one is the resource consent surrender fee. So that was a new consent surrender fee that was included in the new schedule. Since the consultation period, staff have determined that charge could actually potentially be counterproductive. So the recommendation is that that is removed from the schedule. Secondly, their staff looked at the boat shed consent fee and associated charges, and due to a review of applications over the last 4 years in terms of those existing structures and often an associated boat ramp, that actually the average processing cost of those was much less, so it makes sense to reduce that charge, and that charge is then more reasonable and appropriate. And the final third amendment is just an error correction where a volume marker was used in table 24 when it's actually a length marker. So it's just the removal of the cubic volume indicator in that table. In terms of when we're responding to specific matters, there was a just brief narrative within the item around our responses to those matters, and one of which was and I guess this is something that has come through in other conversations around winter grazing regulations, and while the central government may be discussing the repeal of those, we still do have in Southland requirements within our Southland Water and Land Plan, and that does involve staff time and cost. Yeah.
As well as not discussing the voting. So can I just seek a clarification?
Yes, Amy, can we just get some clarification on that? We've got a couple of people here who have a conflict. They could actually understand, vote on A, but not.
So I'll run through those questions. So I just there's one aspect of clarification that Amy, that I'd really like your view on. So the 2 councillors who have identified that they have a conflict of interest in fees and charges, in the matters in the recommendation, in recommendation number 2, A and B, those are both matters for which your declaration means that you do have a conflict on those. And just to be clear, you can neither discuss the matters nor vote on them. But I just want to be clear, is the accepted matter that the councillors are actually absent from the council chamber, or that they can just not discuss and not vote?
It's the latter, so they're not discussing and not voting,
Okay.
and they would only remove themselves from the council chamber if the matter under discussion was being discussed in public excluded.
Right, okay, thank you. That's what I just need to be clear on. So Councillor Gibson can sit at his appointed part of the table. So is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're clear. Okay, thank you. So we need to take the recommendations, Chair, one by one so that that councillors are not compromised in that conversation. Thank you, Amy.
So are we ready to vote on recommendation 1, which is Morris? You've got a comment.
Well, there's a number of minor errors that I'd like to draw your attention to as well.
Yep.
So, yeah, some of them are pretty small and probably on page 43, you've got a third bullet point under objections in bold, and I don't understand why that should be in bold and the others are not in bold. They're all equal importance, I would have thought. Throughout the document, there's the use of the talking about gravel, for example, on page 53, but in several other places as well. You use the term per metre 3. In some places that's got a superscript, in other places it's not. It should always be a superscript, I think. There's that, you'll find those a number of other places. On page 55, this goes to land, talking about effluent. We've got the word sewerage in there. Third one down, it should be sewage. Sewerage is the pipes and sewage is the stuff in the pipes. On page 57, I'm not sure what this means. Land use says under description it's got dredging, alter and protection work. So I assume that means alteration of the land or something. It should be expanded on a bit so that's clear exactly what it is.
So can staff clarify the dredging after protection work?
I think that was probably alteration.
I think it is alteration, but we will be clear for the
Yeah,
purpose.
I think it should be dredging, alteration and protection.
Yeah, it would make sense.
We can amend those minor amendments.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for
thank you for those.
And there is no impediment for all councillors to vote on receiving the recommendations.
Okay, do we have back to the right page?
Page 31. Page 31.
Right, so 1 is the non-controversial to receive the long-term annual pay report fees and deliberation charges. Deliberation. Does that make sense?
Receive the report.
Yeah.
Yep.
Receive the report. Do we have a mover to receive the report?
Yes.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Phil. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? No. Carried. We'll now move to item 2, which talks about the inflation adjustment of 3.7%, the removal of the surrender fee and the boat shed fee introduced, and correction to table 24.
So can I just clarify? I think there should be A, B, C, D So can we just amend that so that it's A, inflation adjustment, B, removal of surrender fee, C, boat shed fee introduced, and D, correction of table 24, and can we please take them item by item, Chair?
Somebody like to move A, the inflation adjustment of 3.7%, moved by Phil, seconded by Paul. Is there any discussion? Not, I will put the motion, all in favour say aye. Aye.
And we will
Record the abstentions from you and me and Alistair. Right, we'll move to B, which is the removal of a surrender fee, which is pretty straightforward. I think Phil will move, seconded by Neville. Is there any discussion? If not, I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Once again, we will note the abstentions. We move to C, which is the boat shed fee being introduced. Moved by Phil. Seconded by the chair. Any discussion? I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye. Right, and we'll note the abstentions again.
There's no abstentions, we want to know to that, this one's acceptable.
Oh, we don't need any abstentions. It's not quite controversial. There's no issue, is there? Yeah. So that's all in favour, say aye. And on D is correction to table 24.
It's a matter on page 33, just want to repeat it.
Right, so that was correction. An error in the quantity measurement indicator was identified in table 24 of the draft. It refers to the pipeline being longer than 30 cubic metres.
Should be just 30 metres.
It's just a cube over the length.
So very minor.
3.
Moved by Phil,
Second.
seconded by Paul. All in favour will say aye.
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 Thank you.
Right. We now move to 7.4, which is concurrent consultations, deliberations. Would you like to comment on the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair, this item outlines the concurrent consultations and the asking for feedback on a range of issues outside of the principal topic of proposals of the long-term plan and rates and rates policy. So start off with the target rapid control rate, which was discussed at the deliberation on the 10th of June. So this just provides a little bit of further breakdown in regard to where the submitters came from in terms of for and against the targeted rapid control rate, and majority were in favour of the rate continuing in the current area, and the only objections that we had address information for came from outside of that region, which John asked a question on, in the deliberation. So the recommendation is to continue with the current targeted rapid control rate in area. In regard to the shareholding in Southport, there was a mixed response in terms of the proposal that was on the table, which was a call on exploring in the next 3 years of the long-term plan the opportunity of selling down to a majority, so while still retaining a majority share, and investigating the strategic asset and investment use of that, and whether that could be of more value for council and ratepayers. The recommendation is that the investigation continues as it was proposed in the consultation document. both the rates remission policy and the significant engagement policy did not attract many submissions at all. One comment was received on the rates remission and postponement policy in regard to the Māori remission and postponement on Māori freehold land, which we have addressed in the item in regard to our requirements under the Local Government Act and the Local Government, the rating of whenua Māori Amendment Act in 2021, as well as what is set out in the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act 1993. For both of those policies, it's recommended that the changes that were outlined in the proposal as of the consultation document and that meeting on the 27th of March are accepted to go through to audit. And a note of the two other concurrent consultations that were run alongside the long-term plan, being the Regional Climate Change Strategy and the Representation Review, that they have been managed through a separate process.
Thanks for that. Is there any questions to staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on page 76, reinvest all, I assume that's meant to be money, but it looks like it. Y
Sorry.
turned into a V.
Yes, sorry, through you, Chair, it does mean to be money, it's just been cut off by the figure.
Oh, that's the reason. I thought it was. Page on the rates remission policy, rates remission postponement, on page 81. I wonder if on the third line, you've got cost effective. There's just one word that should be made into two words there. On page 82, the fourth point, all applications will be considered, an S there.
Yes.
And I wonder, on the last sentence on number 5, it says you will be advised of the review and its outcome, then that should be the ratepayers or the ratepayer will be advised. Might be an improvement there. On page 83, third bullet point, second bullet point under conditions and criteria for sports associations. For clarification, I thought that should be the land must not be used for horse or greyhound racing rather than galloping or harnessing. I imagine it's been there for many years, but just to make it consistent, so horse or greyhound racing, I consider that. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, bottom of page 92, the last sentence of the second last paragraph says, at times councillors will be required to make tough decisions. I think tough is a little bit vague, and I would suggest that it should be at times councillors will be required to make decisions that not all of the community agrees with, or something like that. Would that be better, or are you happy with the word tough again?
Well, I quite like your amendment.
Sorry?
I like your amendment, thank you.
Can I just ask a question in regard? So, if all of the communities, all, everyone, see that?
That's not all of the community agrees.
That, not all.
Yeah. Not all.
Well, the key thing there is that decision making remains the responsibility of the councillors.
The tough's a bit vague.
Agreed.
don't know how many tough councillors we've got, so yeah, get rid of that one.
So, I'm happy to move that, recommendation, Mr. Chairman, unless anybody else has got anything else.
I'm just looking at that, the racing one, would that not just be simpler to just be, must not be used for racing? Rather than, we're trying to specify, but it's really about racing per se, isn't it? It's,
Well, I think it's important to say horse and greyhound racing and not just people racing.
right, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So it's,
Terrier racing.
Good on you in a race.
I'll be the same.
I think
My
you'll, I
odds
think
wouldn't be
you'll
good.
win.
probably does need to be clear because we have had an ongoing issue with a racing thing that says they don't receive any income.
I'm happy to move those with those alterations, Mr. Chairman.
So staff are clear on the alterations? Okay, so we've got a motion from Morris for those changes, a seconder.
Well, really, the whole thing, 1 to 6, with
1 to
those,
6, yeah.
with those changes.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that
Yeah.
motion?
So you're going through the 1 to 6 in regards to, obviously, I just want to make a point around the Southport and just to reiterate, this is not that we are.
To investigate.
Yeah, to investigate, to look, it's not saying, right, it's for sale. And I think probably need to know that it's hugely important. We still have same control of 51. That's the other, that was very prominent in the discussion. So, no, what's going to make.
No, I think that is a very good point that we don't want to cover anybody else thinking we might be going to sell shares overnight. It gives us the ability to investigate actually over the next 10 years. So with that clarification, anything else that needs clarified? If not, we've got more. You're moving 1 to 6 with the amendments. We have a seconder for that.
I second
Oh, you've already done that? Okay, any further comments? If not, I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Right. I don't believe there are any urgent business. No public excluded business. So on that note, I will thank you for your debate this morning on quite a number of very important issues, and I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your participation.
Excellent.